By 2003, Lego was losing $1 million a day. $1 million every single day, with $800 million of debt on top of that. And this was a company that had gone 66 years, from 1932 to 1998, without ever once posting an annual loss. The weird bit? They'd been trying harder than ever: more products, more innovation, more creativity. That was the problem. This is the story of the world's most beloved toy company and how it nearly destroyed itself by doing too much. Ollie Kurt Christiansen was a carpenter in a tiny village called Billund in Denmark. In 1932, in the middle of the Great Depression, he'd had to lay off almost all his workers. Customers couldn't afford furniture anymore. So he started making smaller things: miniature ladders, ironing boards, then toys. And the toys sold better than anything else. He was particular about making them well. There was a sign on the factory floor that said, "Only the best is worthy." By 1934, he had a name for the company: Lego. It comes from two Danish words, leg godt, which means play well. He later found out it also means put together in Latin, which he hadn't planned. The factory burned down twice. Once in 1924, when his young sons were playing in the workshop and set fire to some wood shavings. He rebuilt bigger. Then again in 1942, an electrical fire took everything. He rebuilt bigger again. He was that kind of person. After the war, Lego got hold of Denmark's first plastic injection molding machine. In 1949, they produced their first plastic brick. They called them automatic binding bricks, which is a terrible name, and they didn't sell well at all. Wooden toys still made up about 90% of the company's revenue well into the early 1950s. But Gottfried, Oller's son, who'd been in the business since he was a teenager, had an idea. In 1954, on a ferry to England, he got talking to a toy buyer who said something that stuck. That toys didn't have a proper system. They were just things sitting there. What if everything worked together? That became what Lego called the system of play. Every brick fits every other brick. A set you buy today connects to a set your dad bought in 1975. The patent for the stud and tube design was filed in January 1958. Ole died 2 months later, in March, having seen his little carpentry workshop turn into something he probably couldn't have imagined. By the late 1990s, Lego was in over 100 countries, with those 66 consecutive years of profit intact. Then in 1998, the first bad year, a loss of around $48 million. They recovered in 1999, another bad year in 2000, back to thin profit in 2001 and 2002. And each time, the story inside the company was, it's fine, we're innovating, we're growing, we're ahead of the curve. What they were actually doing was expanding into everything: theme parks, a clothing range, their own TV shows, retail stores, video games built in house. At one point, they had over 14,000 unique brick parts in production. They'd launched so many product lines that almost none of them were making money. When someone finally looked properly at the numbers, only 3 lines were actually turning a profit: Lego Star Wars, Lego Harry Potter, and one other range. And the first 2 only made money in years when there was a new film out. In 2003, sales fell 30% in a single year. The debt hit $800 million. The losses were running at $1 million a day. Mr. Christiansen, Ollie's grandson, who'd been running the company, brought in a strategist called Jørgen Vig Nudstorp to take stock of things. Nudstorp was in his mid-30s, a former McKinsey consultant, had been at Lego for about 2 years. His presentation to the board didn't mince words. "We are on a burning platform," he told them, "losing money with negative cash flow and a real risk of debt default, which could lead to a breakup of the company. Not a fun meeting to be in." Nuttall becomes CEO in 2004. What he did next was probably the opposite of what you'd expect from someone trying to save a creative company. He stopped innovating. Well, what? Not entirely, but he cut everything that wasn't the brick. Theme park sold off, clothing range gone, the in house video game operation shut down. He cut the number of unique parts from 14,000 to about 7,000. 1,000 people lost their jobs, the US factory in Connecticut closed. And then slowly, the company went back to just making sets. The design teams went from total creative freedom to being told it has to make financial sense. The licensing deals were already pointing the way. Star Wars had been running since 1999. Lego had compressed their entire 2-year product development cycle to about 12 months, just to get sets out in time for The Phantom Menace. Harry Potter followed, then Indiana Jones, Marvel, DC. It worked because it was still fundamentally Lego. You were building. You were just building X-Wings and Hogwarts. By 2006, the operating margin was back above 15%. In 2014, the Lego Movie came out, which, if you've seen it, is essentially an advert for Lego that people willingly paid to watch. And it made almost $500 million at the box office. That year, global sales went up 13%, and for the first time ever, Lego overtook Mattel to become the largest toy company in the world by revenue. In 2024, they brought in around $10.7 billion. From a carpenter in Billund who started out making wooden ladders because nobody could afford furniture. The thing I keep coming back to is that Lego didn't fail because it ran out of ideas. It nearly failed because it had too many. Designers with full creative freedom and almost no financial discipline. Hundreds of product lines, most of them losing money. The whole thing propped up by a couple of franchises that only worked when Hollywood happened to be releasing something. The fix wasn't more creativity, it was less. Focus on the brick, cut the rest, and let the thing that actually worked do its job, which is either a lesson about business or about most things, really. If you found that interesting, the SpaceX and Nvidia stories are already on the channel. Both follow a similar pattern, and both nearly ended before anyone outside their industries had heard of them. Subscribe if you want more of this. See you in the next one.